All right, we're just going to look at this, and if the Lord will allow us, I'd like to be able to go on and just make this a verse-by-verse study in the book of Proverbs, but we'll just see what the Lord does here. But here in verse number 1, look at it again. It starts off saying the Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel. Now, it's interesting how that it starts here. And the first thing out of the chute is the word Proverbs. Proverbs, the Proverbs. And by the way, the word, it literally means the original sense of superiority in mental action. Did you hear that? I'm going to give it to you again. It's a powerful thought. The original sense of superiority in mental action. It also means a pithy maxim, usually of metaphorical nature. And literally, the word that is used here comes from a word that is pronounced mashal, whose root word means to rule, showing that these are sayings that we are to rule and govern our lives by. Somebody say amen. All right, so as we look at that, I want you to consider these things. Now, what are Proverbs to you? Let me ask you, you ready? You got to help me with some of these. See if you can finish them. Two wrongs don't make a right. The pen is mightier. When in Rome, do as the Romans. The squeaky wheel, when the going gets tough. No man is an island. Let's see here. Hope for the best, but prepare a plan for the worst. Better late. Yeah, I know some of you govern your lives by that. Birds of a feather. How about this one? This is a good one. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. A picture is worth. There is no such thing. There's a few of those. As a free lunch. There's no. Yes. The early bird. Let's see here. I don't know if you've heard this one or not. You can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. That's right. God helps those. Okay. Cleanliness is next. A watch pot. Beggars can't. So you've heard a lot of these, haven't you? We could go on. I've got a bunch of them up here, but you get the idea. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. He did a bunch of them, didn't he? But that gives us the idea of Proverbs, there's a substance, there's a truth. It's not like some Facebook meme. These have real truths that are connected to them. Look again at verse number 1. It starts off the Proverbs, but then it says the Proverbs of what? Solomon. So we talk about the Proverbs, but for a moment here, let's talk about the progeny. Solomon, the son. Can I just remind you who this young man is? This right here is otherwise known as the wisest man who ever lived. This is the choice son of David, king of Israel. But I just thought it was interesting, and you can read about how that God was even impressed with Solomon's prayer request. When he showed up to him in a dream and he said, hey, ask whatever you want. And he thought for a minute and he said, God, I'm not going to ask for a lot of things, but I sure would like to have wisdom, or I'd like to know how to go out and to come in before your people, and I'm awful young and I don't know what's going on. And God said, man, because you've asked this thing and because you care about my people, I'm going to give you the life of your enemies. I'm going to give you wealth beyond what you could dream, and I'm going to give you wisdom. You can read about that in 1 Kings chapter 3. But Solomon here, and this is what I want you to get, he starts off the Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David. As a matter of fact, and by the way, it's interesting, he's gone from Proverbs, he talked about himself as the progeny, but then he gave praise, and he gave praise to his earthly father. Isn't that interesting? As a matter of fact, when he says the Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel, excuse me, what was Solomon? He was king of Israel. But he said, man, like you hear about many of these kings in the past, they say, I haven't attained to my father. My daddy was a man of God. My daddy loved God with all of his heart. These are the Proverbs of Solomon, who's just the son of David. And let me tell you, David was the king. By the way, don't you see the essence? Don't you see the reality of his wisdom that is finally coming out? You know, Solomon, and by the way, the book of Proverbs, most of them are Solomon's, but there are other Proverbs in here that are not even his, but have been conglomerated into this. But Solomon gets the credit. Solomon, though, the wisest king, only wrote 3 books. He wrote a book of romance in his youth that is named the Song of Solomon. Then, at the zenith of his political career, he wrote a book entitled Proverbs. And then, at the end of his life, when he was looking back on all of the heartaches and all of the bad decisions that he made, he wrote a book of regrets that was called Ecclesiastes. Can I tell you something, friend? If he would have ended up more like his father, there is no telling how far his glory would have gone. So as you think about this, though, let me remind you, turn with me to Acts chapter 13. So we see the progeny, but man, when he said, hey, I'm the son of David, and David is the king of Israel. Acts chapter 13, I want you to see this for yourself. Acts chapter 13, and look if you would at verse number 22. And when he had removed him, he raised up unto them David to be their king, to whom also he gave testimony and said, I have found David the son of Jesse, a man after mine own heart, which shall fulfill all my will. Perhaps, if I could even say it like this, when we're reading about Solomon here, the Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel, perhaps David's greatest work was in making Solomon. By the way, let me say it like this. David and Solomon was the son of his old age. You know, a lot of times when parents get to their older age, a lot of times they have lost their parental abilities. If I can use that terminology. A lot of times they quit. They don't want to keep going to the games, or they don't want to keep participating in this, and they don't want to have to do this. But not David. Now, I'm not saying that David was everything that he should have been in the very last days of his life. But David came around when David had to. And David still had a hand of influence that laid upon the life of Solomon in a powerful way. You know, we're even told in the book of Psalms, Psalm 127 and verse 4, as arrows are in the hand of a mighty man, so are children of the youth. But here, this was not in David's youth. That was a man named Absalom. Are you with me? And he had a few others in there. And there's no doubt that Absalom had great power, that Absalom had a personality. There's no doubt that Absalom had great wisdom from a fleshly standpoint. I mean, he really was a powerful and an awe-inspiring person and an awe-inspiring man. And I'll be honest with you, he must have been a leader. He had to have been a leader to be able to do what he did. Although it was all in rebellion, he had great leadership qualities. But we see, though, that was all trumped by David when he was developing his son Solomon. He got better and better as a father, even in his old age. All right, let's get into this quickly. You ready here? Number one, I want you to see the purpose of the book. The purpose of the book. We see that here in verses 2 through 4. To know wisdom and instruction. To perceive the words of understanding, to receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, and judgment, and equity, to give subtlety to the simple, to the young man knowledge and discretion. This is the whole purpose of the book. Now we have 4 main verbs that are given to us here. Now stick with me. I'm just trying to point out what God put in here for us to understand. The first thing he said was to know. To know. You see that in verse number 2? To know wisdom and instruction. As a matter of fact, it means to know in the widest sense of the word. To have working knowledge of in all of its intricacies. As a matter of fact, it is the same word that is used in Genesis when it says that Adam knew his wife Eve, and she conceived and bare a child. It is the same word. Are you with me here? Okay? That, my friend, is an intimate knowledge. If you follow me here, that is an important knowledge. It is an engendering knowledge. Let me tell you something, Christian. We need to start knowing intimately in a way that wisdom will bring forth itself and will birth things in your life. Does everybody see that? Okay, it is an important thing that we need to have that's going on. Matter of fact, the word wisdom here, it means to be skillful and to have wisdom. The word for, in verse number 2, to know wisdom and instruction. Here's the word instruction. You ready? Chastisement. Isn't that something how so quickly in this book of wisdom we find out about chastisement and reproof and warning? Let me tell you something, friend. One of the greatest things that'll happen in your life is to recognize the hand of God when it comes in your life in chastisement. Amen, preacher. Amen. Okay? All right. So the first word that he gave here was that the purpose of the book was to know. Look at, if you would, at verse number 2, right at the end of verse number 2. It says to perceive. To perceive. And that is an interesting word because it means to separate mentally. In other words, they're going to start looking at and perceiving things and start distinguishing some things in our lives. Let me tell you, I'm getting to something here and I'm trying to concentrate on the home and on children. Let me tell you something, and it doesn't matter who you are somebody's kid in here tonight, and we all ought to be seeking for wisdom in our lives. It doesn't matter if you're 15, doesn't matter if you're 17, doesn't matter if you're 27, 37, 47, 87. I don't care, doesn't matter to me. I'm telling you, we all need to be students abundance of wisdom. And let wisdom have her perfect way, and let wisdom be that we might know, but that we might perceive. As a matter of fact, there in verse number 2, look at what it says. To perceive the words of understanding. Interesting here. The words, it means something that is said. I don't know about you. Do you remember you remember when you had to do your work in your school and mark things off or whatever? Do you remember ever getting things wrong just because you didn't read the directions? Good, I just want to make sure it wasn't me. I didn't want to expose myself like that. Let me tell you something, I did that, I can't tell you how many times. And after a while, I just like, this is stupid. I ain't going to do that. I'm at least going to make sure I read the directions. That is the principle. He's saying, hey, you need to perceive the words, something that is said. Have you ever told your kids, say, listen, this is what I want you to do, and this is what I want you to do, this is how I want you to do it. And sure enough, they go back and they come back. You say, you did not do it. Oh, yeah, no, I did exactly what. No, you didn't either. I know what I said to you. You did not listen to me. Let me tell you, though, I do believe that God means what He says in His Word, don't you? Okay, so this is, and by the way, you need to know there's going to be a test. I'm just letting you in on a clue. Okay? I don't know when, but there's going to be a test. That's why you better heed the words that are given. That's why you better understand the words. Matter of fact, it talks about the words, but then understanding as in knowledge and meaning, something that has substance to it. You say, preacher, what are you talking about here? You know, sometimes, have you ever been around someone that can't, no matter what you tell them, you try and explain something to them, and even though it's right there, they can't see it? Are you with me here? Have you ever been around somebody like that? I'm leading you here. And I didn't necessarily have this plan. I did notice it, but I didn't have it planned like this. How many times have you talked to people, though, you can tell them and tell them and tell them and tell them, and no matter how many times you tell them, they don't see it. They don't get it. Ready? Proverbs 4:19. Ready? Come on. The way of the wicked is as darkness. They know not at what they stumble. John 1:10. He was in the world, and the world was made by him, and the world knew him not. John 3:19. And this is the condemnation, that light is come into the world, and men love darkness rather than light, because their deeds were evil. Romans 1:21. Because that, when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was dark. You know it? Keep going. 2 Corinthians 4:3 and 4. But if our gospel be hid, it is hid to them that are lost, in whom the God of this world hath blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine unto them. Ephesians 4:18. Having the understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of God, through the ignorance that is in them, because of the blindness of their heart. I'm telling you, it is exactly what is being talked about in Proverbs chapter 1. And the problem comes because we're at a point where we're not perceiving the things, the words of understanding that we should be understanding at this time in our life. Okay? That's the second word. Look at the third word. right there in verse number 3, what does it say? To receive the instruction of wisdom. Matter of fact, the word receive means to take it, to accept it. Have you ever argued with a kid because they're so sure that they're right about something? And then halfway through, you can see that what you're saying finally resonates with them, but they still ain't going to change. Is it just me that's lived that life? Yeah. You know what? Because it all comes down to a point, doesn't it, where we all have to come and receive. By the way, friend, you need to understand that is the difference between someone believing in God and someone being saved believing in God. You can believe in God's existence, but that does not mean that they have received the truth of what is being said right there. Let me tell you something, Christian, though. We do the same things. Do we receive? Do we accept? Or do we have all of these provisos? Do we have all of these things and all of these quid pro quos? We set up all of these things around here and say, well, if it meets my understanding, then I'll accept it. No, my friend, we need to make sure that we are receptive to the things that God has said. Look at what else it says right there. I want you to read it, verse number 3. To receive the instruction, that's that chastisement, that warning, that reproof of wisdom, justice, judgment, and equity. By the way, these are important things, and they are important things in your home. I'm going to give them to you very quickly. You ready? Number 1, the instruction of wisdom. And by the way, that means to be circumspect and to be intelligent. It means to notice things and to see them for what they are. And let me tell you, we need to make sure that we are teaching our children, our progeny, these ones that come from us, so that they will not just live stupidly, but that they will live circumspectly in wisdom. Otherwise, we're just raising a group of idiots. Not only that, it talks about justice. Right. That which is right, both moral and legal. Let me tell you, I think, boy, it is important. And man, me talking about some of this, it gets my juices flowing. But you need to know this. As I talk about it, I know where I failed. I know some of the places I failed. And they probably know more places I failed than I do. Now, with that in mind, justice is important in a home. Now, they don't always have to see you get on to someone else. They're going to have to learn to accept your judgment. But when things need to be said, they need to be said, and they need to be said with force. Otherwise, you're not teaching your children this. It was said that Susanna Wesley, who had those couple famous boys, there were actually 19 children she had. 19. You had how many there, Miss Beulah? Yeah. 10. My goodness. She had 19. But she had, it's funny because she had a couple rules. Now in that kind of a home, you have to have a lot of rules, but there were some rules that would never be changed. One of them was that no child was ever allowed at any time to play with any other child's toy. That was just the rule. If they did, they met severe punishment. That's just the way it was. They say, well, you didn't like it, didn't matter. That was justice, and that's what she said in the home, and bless God, that's what they held to. Let me tell you something. Whatever it is, I'm not necessarily condoning that, But I am saying whatever justice you have, you better hold to it, and you need to teach your Is it amazing to me, and boy, I ever watched Judge Judy? Sometimes, I'll just be honest with you, I'm thinking, who are these idiots? Idiots! Now, there's some times where I get on and it's just like, honestly, if they lied to her, even if they're right, they're done. I mean, it's over. You can just forget it. She ain't playing around with none of that kind of junk. Okay, but man, I'm going to tell you, man, here's the thing, though. Some of these people, they grow up and they want to just plead their cause, and really what they are bullies. And I'm going to tell you, she sees right through all that mess. And she don't have no use for it. Let me tell you something. We need that in our homes. How are you going to teach that unless you show that being done in your home? Not only that, what else is said? Judgment. Judgment. A verdict as in something that is pronounced. And let me tell you something, parents. This is free. Once you say something, I'm not talking about just justice now. I'm talking about judgment. If you say they're in trouble, they better be in trouble. My stomach turns when I go to the store. I'm going to count to 3. I told you. They're going to sit there. You can hear them all over the store. They're going to argue with them for 30 minutes the whole time they're in there. You know what the problem is? Judgment. Judgment. Brother, there was a couple times, I'm sure I've told you some of this before. My daddy, there was a couple times where I did expressly what he told me not to. I remember we were at someone's house. It was in Minnesota. It was in snow. There was nothing else to do. There were no other kids. And 2 adults were spending the week talking. It was very frustrating. They take forever when they talk. I'm just telling you. And it was frustrating me. So I didn't know what else to do. So there's snow. So I made me a big snowball, and I saw a van over there. It wasn't mine, but I just hit it. I mean, you could just hear that thump, boom. And I was like, man, that was pretty neat. So I bent down to make me. All of a sudden, I heard, Chris? I was like, yes, sir. He said, don't you do that again. Yes, sir. So I went making snow angels. Did I tell you it takes forever for adults to talk? It was forever. Finally, I don't know what got in my head, but I thought, there's a van. There's snow. And sure enough, I made me another snowball. And boy, I was looking them back on first base, and boy, I just went, boom. And I thought, man, that's pretty good. I'll do it again. And all of a sudden, when I bent over that second time, I heard it again. Chris? And I thought, that sounds vaguely familiar. And then came the next thing, and it was this. And I never liked these words. That, what did I tell you? I'm going through the files in my mind. What did he tell me? All right, this is fairly recent, so it's like, don't hit the van with a snowball. Oh, you get in the car and you sit there until I'm done. I'm going to tell you, it was probably another 5 months it took them to finish their conversation. It took forever. Finally, he got back, and it was a long way back to the house. And I thought, I'm going to schmooze him on this one. We had the best time going home. I made every joke you could think of. I did everything, man. I was going to pull one over on him. Buddy, we got to the house. I slammed that door behind me. I was like, I'm going up to my room, man. I done good on this one. And sure enough, I heard, Chris? Yeah, what's wrong? I think you need to go to my room for a little bit. What? Oh. You remember, as long as I told you, as it took those parents to continue talking, it was at least 3 years now that I was sitting alone in his bedroom waiting for him. And let me tell you, he came in. And he wasn't swayed by all the tricks that I had played on my way home. He had one thing in mind, and that was to teach his son about judgment. Let me tell you something, friend. There better be teeth to things. Whenever you give a rule or what, y'all ought to be saying amen right in here. Amen. There's got to be judgment. Otherwise, you're going to teach your kids that they can get away with whatever, and they can act however they want to, and they can pull one over, and that just as long as they're good. But if they know that they did wrong, it's okay. No, my friend, you have to follow this through. You've got to teach judgment. The next thing, you ready? Here's another one, and this is not always popular either. What's the next one there in verse number? Equity. Verse number 3. Equity. 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 Here it is. You ready? Pretty simple. Evenness. Even. What one person has for rules, everybody has for rules. Otherwise, you're going to start playing favorites. Well, I'm not saying you can't allow them to earn special privileges, but I'm going to tell you, when it comes to stuff like this, there better be an evenness that is distributed. If you talk to them, they might be able to tell you sometimes where I haven't been purely equitable. I don't know. In my mind, I try and weigh things out. But they know, and they do know this, they don't know whatever happened to the other person all the time either. And as best I've tried to be equitable.